this week I'm joined by a legal expert, Augusto Zimmerman, who I'm really excited to have a discussion with about. We've had discussions in the past, particularly this time last year during lockdowns. He's a wealth of knowledge and he's going to really help us shed a light on the issue of the voice of the parliament, potentially a voice of the parliament from Aboriginal communities. He wrote an excellent piece for the Epoch Times, which I strongly recommend reading, which I'll leave in the description when I post this. Augusto, I want to welcome you to the show, and I'm very eager to get into this with you.
Thank you, Joe. It's a pleasure to be talking to you again.
Awesome. Augusto, we're in a bit of an awkward position right now. We're in a situation where we don't really know what this Labor government is putting forward for the actual voice of the parliament, how Aboriginals might be written into the constitution, and what a question would look like for a potential referendum taken to the people. But this article that you wrote, you did put some solid stakes in the ground saying, hang on a sec, these are some things that we can get right or wrong. Can you please frame this for us?
Yes, everybody wants the protection of the Aboriginal community. We fight for the human rights. But the problem is when the elites have a different plan and they attempt to use this important issue in order to accumulate more power and control over the society, and especially by treating the Aborigines as a means by which they can actually exercise a more oppressive power, not only on the Aborigines, but also on the society as a whole, including our beloved Aborigines in our communities. So I have my concern about this being used for the opposite purposes of protecting human rights, or potentially even being an instrument for the undermining of human rights and even causing more division and more violations of these rights, as I have mentioned in the article.
There was an interesting point made by a number of different commentators. One in particular was Jacinta Price, who's the newly made senator to the parliament. And she made the point that we might actually see a situation where the Aboriginal population is actually already overrepresented in the parliament. I do believe we've got, correct me if I'm wrong, 11 Aboriginal members to the parliament out of 227, which is actually outstrips the Aboriginal population in the general Australian population. And she's on that basis, she's made the point that we perhaps don't need a voice to the parliament.
I think it's an important point, indeed.
Where do you see this particular situation with Aboriginal representation?
I see this as potentially problematic because the idea of the constitution in this country is to distribute the powers of government, basically by setting up separation of powers between the different branches of government, and also what we can regard as a vertical division of powers as a result of the option made to establish a federal system of government. So the Constitution is not there to be telling us anything about history, but it is to limit the power of the state and to make sure that these powers are properly controlled, ultimately by the citizens in this country, in this nation. But another thing I have to say is that this voice might not be representative at all, because there is an idea already proposed, and I have even mentioned in this article, that this could not potentially not be an elected body. So the elites are clearly pushing for an unelected body, so that they will be able to put the so-called leaders in this sort of body in parliament. That is another very dangerous development. We don't want to have a body in parliament that doesn't have democratic legitimacy and of self-declared people who claim to be the voice for the Aboriginal community. But we need to make sure that anybody that is in the position of making laws in this country have a proper democratic legitimacy. And I don't see this to be the case regarding this particular proposal.
What are some of the big red flags that you see? Obviously, as I said at the start, we don't have all the details. If what are some real red lines that you wouldn't want to see crossed with this?
Look, the point is that the passage of the bills would be potentially blocked by this unelected body and unrepresentative body. So we would have a oligarchical process here, whereby the self-appointed leaders of the Aboriginal community would be able to dictate what is in the best interests of this particular community and the interests of the community in general. So this is not coming from a democratic perspective at all, and I believe that this will retard the passage of bills in Parliament, and would add also an oligarchical element to the process. So the whole thing is completely corrupt, in my opinion, and that would certainly lead to unintended consequences as a result. So this idea is absolutely tragic and should be avoided by all means.
Mm. There are a lot of people in America where it is a lot more of a heated debate when it comes to black versus white sort of statistics, debates. And there's a lot of race hustlers that are known over there that are basically go about, if there's if there's a shooting of a black man with policing, completely different issue, but they're always there. I'm really worried that all this is going to do is the people that have so-called been advocates for the Aboriginal community for sometimes decades that have made very little progress, all that they're doing is further entrenching their own power because they're in with Canberra. Whereas this is not actually going to be democratic, as you noted in the article.
So, yes, I think your point is very relevant. Indeed, we wouldn't like to see in Australia this radicalization of the debate regarding race. We should actually be race blind and make sure that the laws are attaining the interests of the community in general. I feel in my heart that the best way to fight against racism is to actually not be addressing so directly the differences, because it enforces the differences rather than making us more united. Of course, the left has a very good strategy, which it was, of course, applied in the ancient times by the Romans, and it's called a divide and conquer strategy. So the point is that there are an agenda. There is an agenda behind, whereby people can be seen not on the basis of their merit, of their achievements, but on the basis of the color of skin. I feel in my heart that everybody has the right and even should be proud even of celebrating their own culture. And I think that the Aborigines have lots to celebrate about their culture. But I also believe that in many ways they can be used for the purposes of achieving a more elitist agenda that's not necessarily going to attend their interests. So it could actually be potentially a paternalistic move, whereby, of course, the elites will be able to have more control and power over this group.
Yeah, it's funny you allude to the long march through the institutions, anything that's going to pull Australians apart, because quite often we see the actual Chinese Communist Party and some of the commentary out from China makes the point that Australia belongs to the actual Aboriginals and the Aboriginals should be put in charge and the Chinese would liberate the Aboriginals. I don't know, have you ever seen that kind of commentary before?
Well, that is obviously the case of groups that want to weaken, in a certain sense, the national unity in this nation. So every time we have these sort of discussions, it's not about bringing us together. It's not about making us stronger, even against our potential enemies. What they really want to do is to make us as weak as possible and destroy ultimately this nation. Of course, that would be the first step towards a total conquest of Australia, which is a country very rich in natural resources. So, of course, if I was the enemy, if I were trying to do harm rather than good, the first thing I would try to do is to divide people into lines of race, ethnicity, culture. And that's why the multicultural project is so dreadful to on national integrity and unity, because it creates more division and people who don't feel so much integrated in this nation, but quite to the contrary, they have grievances that were perhaps even given to them as a result of the educational system that we have in this nation, that it's so undesirable.
Mm. Augusto, what are perhaps some better ways that we could go about helping the Aboriginal community other than doing something, like this, which is probably a bit more, it's a degradation of other people's rights to have a two-stepped society. What other ways could we be helping them?
I think the best way that to be helping them is to give them a sense of dignity and self-respect, and for them to be even proud of their own achievements, but not depending on government, not being subjects of the enslavement of the state via welfare. So
Mm,
I think welfare has basically destroyed these communities, and it's been causing so much harm. And it is an attempt to enslave people without their knowledge. Because
mm,
if you become dependent on government, then you're not a free person. So what I propose to my Aboriginal friends, my brothers and sisters here in Australia, is that they should fight against more governmental control and acquire their sense of autonomy and independence from government. They should support less government and not more government.
mm. Well, Augusto, I want to thank you so much for your discussion on this topic. Obviously, this is an evolving topic, and as we get more and more details from the Labor Party, it'll be very interesting to go through that. Last thing I want to ask you about, I did an interview with Professor David Flint last night, and he had a chat earlier in the week about this debate on the voice to the Parliament, and some of the proponents of the voice to the Parliament have made the point that they want to limit the amount of details that come out about the voice before a referendum vote, so people don't know what they're voting on. And when when David Flint was asked about this on 2GB radio, he just laughed at it and he said, "Isn't the point of getting an from the people of democracy so that they have to be across the details?" Are you coming across this talking point as well?
Well, I was told about that, but we also know, according to what has already been revealed, that there is an attempt to make this body not elected, on the grounds that it would be very difficult to have a proper democratic process in the choice of these representatives. So they have already revealed part of their ambitions here. And certainly, this is not coming from the perspective of helping necessarily the Aboriginal community, but to exercise, as I say, a paternal overreach, so that they will be somehow looked after by these bureaucrats. But you know that every time government tries to help you, you should be very afraid, because it will come with some conditions attached.
Yeah.
I think the Aborigines should understand that the main culprit for their problems is actually government, that has been now an instrument for the destruction of their community. So I'll tell them to be free from this bondage and
Mm.
to fight against more government. And that's my point of my message for you and for your listeners.
Beautiful. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on such short notice. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to hear more from Augusto Zimmerman, please check out his other pieces as well at the Epoch Times for Australia. He does some phenomenal work. The Epoch Times are giving him an amazing international platform, and the best way to help him and what he's doing is to share those articles out when he does write them. And if I may remind you guys myself, remember to share this video. I'm going to include Augusto's article with a greater explanation on the voice to the Parliament in the description. Augusto, thank you so much. You've been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to having you back on very soon.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to talk to you, and keep up the good work.